I arrived at my parents' home for Easter, only to discover that my self-centered sister had forced them into the garage. It turned out to be her biggest error and ultimately ruined her life. I took everything from her just like she did to them and didn't look back. Hey Reddit, Easter has always been significant in my family. Every year, my parents would transform the house into a festive wonderland. My mom would fill it with fresh flowers and my dad would grill outside, filling the air with the aroma of ham and fresh bread. It wasn't merely a meal, it was an experience. So when I pulled into their driveway that year, I expected the usual scene, my dad waving from the porch, my mom calling from the kitchen, and the front door wide open with cousins and nieces running around. Instead, the house appeared different, silent. The curtains were closed and the porch light was off. Even in the afternoon, my stomach dropped, something was off. As I walked closer, I noticed a couple of my sister's friends' cars haphazardly parked on the lawn, which only heightened my unease. My sister Ashley had always been challenging, self-centered, and convinced the world owed her something. But what I discovered inside left me speechless. The door was unlocked, so I stepped in. Music blasted, definitely not the family Easter tunes, but loud party tracks. Beer cans cluttered the living room, and shoes were strewn across the floor. On the couch, Ashley was laughing with a group of strangers, acting like she owned the place. There was no sign of my parents or Easter, nothing that felt like home. I demanded to know where Mom and Dad were, but Ashley shrugged, sipping her beer as if it were the most ordinary thing. Oh, she said, almost amused, they're in the garage. They didn't want to leave when I told them this was my house now, so I moved them out. She smirked, clearly proud of her actions. I barely heard the rest of her words, rage drowned everything out. I stormed toward the garage, my heart racing, hoping against hope that it wasn't what I feared. When I opened the garage door, I nearly broke down. There, surrounded by boxes and old furniture, were my parents. My dad sat in a folding chair, looking utterly defeated, while my mom tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, folding blankets that didn't need folding. A tiny space heater was plugged in, hopeless against the cold concrete, and I could see their breath in the air. My dad attempted a brave smile, but it faltered. I demanded to know what was happening. Through tears, my mom explained that Ashley had persuaded them to sign a temporary agreement to transfer the house to her name for financial reasons, claiming it was necessary for refinancing. She promised it would be just for a few weeks. But once the paperwork was cleared, she changed the locks, discarded their belongings, and shoved them into the garage like they were unwanted pets. She told them they could leave if they didn't like it, but they had nowhere to go. I was shaking with fury. I hugged my parents tightly, vowing that this wouldn't stand. Ashley had no idea who she was up against. If she thought she could take their home and dignity without facing consequences, she was about to learn a harsh lesson. I left the garage and marched back into the house, ignoring the stares from the strangers who clearly thought this was just a party pad. Ashley barely glanced up when I confronted her. She continued laughing with her friends, brushing me off like I was an annoying fly. That's when I decided I wouldn't argue or plead. I wouldn't waste my breath on someone who saw people as mere obstacles to her enjoyment. I would dismantle her quietly, completely, and without any warning. The next week, I set my plan in motion. I met with a lawyer and brought every document my parents had: old deeds, emails from Ashley promising it was temporary, voicemails where she bragged about owning the house. It turned out Ashley hadn't been careful at all. The agreement she tricked him into signing was full of illegalities, elder abuse, fraudulent misrepresentation, and coercion. My lawyer was thrilled with the case. Meanwhile, I reached out to Ashley's employer. She had lied about her credentials to get a cushy management position, and I compiled a file on every fraudulent act she had committed. Within 2 weeks, the lawsuits were filed not just to reclaim the house, but also to seek significant damages. Ashley was served during one of her ridiculous parties. The look on her face when she realized she was being taken to court was priceless. Her smug grin vanished instantly, and it only got worse from there. One by one, her friends abandoned her upon learning the truth. Her job fired her when they discovered her fake degree. Her landlord, realizing she was facing an active lawsuit for fraud, refused to rent her anything. In a month, Ashley went from being the queen of the castle to a broke, unemployed mess who couldn't even afford coffee. The final blow came when the judge ruled entirely in our favor. Not only was the house returned to my parents, but Ashley was also ordered to pay restitution, hundreds of thousands of dollars she didn't have. She tried to cry and plead, but the court wasn't sympathetic after hearing how she had forced her elderly parents into a freezing garage during a holiday meant for family and love. She was left with no one to turn to, no friends, no money, no reputation. I didn't gloat, scream, or even look at her as we left the courthouse. Just as she had left my parents alone and humiliated, I left her there, broke and sobbing. It was over. I had taken everything from her just as she tried to take everything from them. I didn't look back, or at least I thought it was finished. But a few weeks later, I received a call. Apparently, Ashley wasn't done wreaking havoc. As the weeks passed, I hoped life would settle down and that Ashley would learn from her mistakes. I believed she had hit rock bottom and would now pick up the pieces of her life. But I was mistaken. The call came at the worst possible moment, just as I was relaxing after a long day at work. My mom's name lit up my screen, but her voice was filled with panic. I could hear the tremor in her words. Ashley had shown up at the house again. This time, she wasn't just angry, she was desperate. The emotional manipulation she had mastered was on full display. She pleaded with my parents for forgiveness, claiming she had changed. She cried, saying she was sorry and needed help to get back on her feet. But something felt different this time. Her tone wasn't the usual self-centered ramble I was accustomed to, it sounded calculated. My parents, understandably hesitant, didn't want to believe their daughter could harbor such hatred. But my mom, being soft-hearted, agreed to meet with Ashley just to hear her out. That night, I went to their house. I wouldn't let Ashley worm her way back in and ruin everything we had worked hard to restore. When I arrived, I saw my parents sitting at the kitchen table, chairs pulled out as if they were waiting. And then I noticed Ashley's car parked in front of the house, a black SUV I hadn't seen before. She was still trying to play the victim. The door swung open before I could knock. There she stood, arms crossed, a pathetic smile on her face. She looked worn out, as if she hadn't slept in days, but something was off. The look in her eyes wasn't of remorse, it was something darker. This wasn't about seeking forgiveness anymore, it was about revenge. She wasted no time with greetings. Without even saying hello, she launched into a tirade. Her story didn't align with the tears she had shed with my mom. She claimed I had ruined her life, taking everything from her job, her reputation, her house. I felt my stomach churn. She painted me as the villain, blaming me for everything. But as she spoke, it became clear she hadn't learned a thing. In fact, she was angrier than ever, her manipulation sharper than before. Now, she wanted to make me suffer. I stood there, momentarily speechless as she kept spewing venom. But I wouldn't let her turn the tables on me this time. My mind raced, figuring out how to deal with this new level of chaos she was creating. I thought I had rid myself of her, that the worst was behind us, but she was plotting, using her charm and whatever dignity she had left to gain leverage. The truth hit me hard, she had a new target, and it wasn't just me. She was playing a much more dangerous game than I had realized. I knew I had to act quickly. I needed to stop her before she caused more harm. But this time, I wouldn't rely on legal loopholes or lawsuits. I would use her own tactics against her. It was time to strike where it hurt most, her pride. I turned to my parents and told them to stay out of it, I would handle it. That's when I began my plan. The following days were filled with strategy. I contacted the right people who understood what Ashley was capable of. I dug deeper, following a trail I had been too emotional to track before. What I discovered was more disturbing than I could have imagined. Ashley had been secretly running a scam. For months, she had been using my parents' house as collateral for loans, forging their signatures to obtain credit. She had even sold personal belongings, some irreplaceable, to fund her lifestyle. She had set up fake accounts, misused credit cards, and swindled thousands from local businesses, all while pretending to be the loving daughter who needed help. The final act came when I confronted her with evidence. I had screenshots, bank statements, and witnesses who saw her sign false documents. I confronted her in front of my parents, ensuring they understood everything she had done. As I laid it all out, Ashley's confident facade began to crack. The woman who thought she could manipulate everyone was now facing the consequences of her actions. She stuttered, attempted to deny everything, but the proof was undeniable. That's when I saw her true colors. The sister I had tried to protect wasn't just lost, she had become a stranger. In the end, she had no one left. My parents, heartbroken by her actions, couldn't help her. She was arrested for fraud and multiple counts of identity theft. Her reputation was ruined. Friends who once supported her turned their backs once they realized how deep her lies ran. As for me, I felt no satisfaction watching her downfall. Once, I might have, but now it felt empty. The cost of her destruction was too high, and the person she had become wasn't even someone I could hate. For my parents, healing would take time. They'd been through so much, and it took a while for them to recover from their child's betrayal. But with me beside them, we rebuilt everything, not just the house, but the trust and love that had been shattered. As for Ashley, she faded into the background, a cautionary tale for anyone who thought they could play with fire and not get burned. I didn't look back. The past was behind me. My parents were safe, their home was theirs again. I had done everything possible to ensure Ashley could never hurt them again. It was a chapter closed, a painful, bitter chapter. But as I walked away from that life, I realized one truth: no matter how many times people try to break you, if you remain true to yourself and fight for those you love, you can rebuild anything. Even when you feel like you've lost it all, there's always a way to rise again. And that, I realized, was the real victory.